Our theme this season is, Why Does the Valley Spirit Not Die? We will introduce Laozi's Chapter 6. We've mentioned before that several chapters in Laozi's work specifically discuss the concept of the Tao. Since we are studying Taoism, it's impossible to avoid the concept of Tao, but it is a concept that's difficult to explain clearly. We often remember the beginning of Laozi's first chapter, where he said, "The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao." Therefore, whenever we encounter such chapters, we must pay special attention and try to explain them as clearly as possible. Let's first read the original text of Chapter 6, The Valley Spirit Never Dies. It is called the Mysterious Female. The gateway of the mysterious female is called the root of heaven and earth. It is continuous and seems to exist. Its usefulness is inexhaustible. It's just 3 simple lines, so how do we understand it? Let me first explain it in plain language. The spirit of the empty valley does not perish and can be referred to as the mysterious reproductive force. The mysterious reproductive force has an outlet, which can be called the root of heaven and earth. It is continuous, seeming to exist, and its function is inexhaustible. The last line, seems to exist, its usefulness is inexhaustible, is Laozi's signature style of using metaphorical expressions, a method he often employs. First, what does valley spirit mean? When reading a book, we are most afraid of encountering isolated concepts, terms that appear only once, making them hard to understand without comparison. What is the valley spirit? A valley is a space between mountains. Laozi had clearly observed valleys. When describing the cultivation of the sage, he would say that the sage's heart is as open and broad as a valley, allowing rivers to flow through it between 2 mountains. The valley has 2 characteristics: it is empty, and it is low. First, let's talk about emptiness. If the valley were full or solid, you would see the river but not the valley. So, it must be empty to allow the river to pass through. Essentially, a valley, in contrast to a mountain, is defined by its emptiness. The second characteristic is that it is low. Of course, there are things lower than valleys, such as seas, which Laozi will also mention later when discussing the relationship between rivers, valleys, and seas. So, what is the valley spirit? The word spirit in ancient times had 2 primary meanings. On the one hand, spirit referred to deities or gods, powerful beings capable of bestowing blessings or calamities on people. When the ancients discussed spirits, they would warn people to be cautious, as spirits would reward the good and punish the evil. On the other hand, spirit could refer to mysterious forces. So how do we understand the valley spirit here? We can think of the valley spirit as the force that makes a valley, which is a mysterious force. The valley allows rivers to flow through it, remains empty, and has infinite potential. So later, Laozi says it does not die. Does not die is a classic negative construction, meaning that the valley spirit never perishes or disappears because the force that makes a valley always exists. Therefore, it can be called the mysterious reproductive force. What does reproductive force mean? It refers to the mysterious power of creation. Mysterious refers to something profound and difficult to understand, as Laozi mentioned in the first chapter when he said, "Mystery upon mystery." It signifies that humans find it difficult to comprehend the deepest secrets of the universe, acknowledging the limits of our rationality. Then there is the phrase the gateway of the mysterious female, meaning that this mysterious reproductive force has an outlet through which it continuously manifests its power. This gateway is called the root of heaven and earth. Laozi frequently uses the word root because he believed that all things in the universe ultimately return to their roots, showing how much he valued the idea of origin. Since it is called the root of heaven and earth, this implies that Tao is the root of heaven and earth. What could be more fundamental than Tao? How do we understand Tao? We can use the valley spirit as a metaphor. Tao is the force that makes a valley. In fact, everything comes from Tao. The valley represents Tao's capacity to allow rivers to flow through, maintaining an empty state and staying in a lowly position, capable of embracing and accepting everything. Thus, what Laozi is describing here is the special function of Tao. Wang Bai's commentary makes this very clear. He believed that the center of the valley holds nothing, no shape, no shadow, no obstruction, and no conflict. It remains in a low position, does not change, stays in a quiet state, and does not decay. All things are born from it, but you cannot see its form. Therefore, the valley spirit is used as a metaphor for the function of Tao. Heaven and earth are the places where all things exist, the largest domain, representing the entire natural world. The root of heaven and earth, of course, is Tao, so Laozi uses the valley spirit to stand for Tao, saying it always exists. This is a reasonable thought. Next, Laozi says, it is continuous and seems to exist. Its usefulness is inexhaustible. Pay attention to the word seems. Seems here is Laozi's way of using metaphorical expressions, as he cannot directly describe what Tao is, but he doesn't want to merely say what it is not either. So, he says it seems to be something. Although this doesn't confirm anything definitively, it provides us with hints, leading us to imagine based on what it seems like. Here, Laozi says it seems to exist, continuous yet inexhaustible. Continuous describes something that is constant, seems to exist suggests that it feels like it is there. But you can't directly say it exists because, once you say Tao exists, that's problematic. Does everything else exist too? The existence of things is temporary and full of changes, but Tao is existence itself, eternal and unchanging. So, at the start, Laozi says, the valley spirit does not die. The phrase does not die indicates that it exists forever. Moreover, this existence is vastly different from the existence of all things. Tao is the source and destination of all existence, and its function is boundless. Here we encounter the philosophical approach of substance and function. When you cannot comprehend the essence of something, you look at its function, using its function to infer its essence. Substance and function are terms that have often appeared since modern times. For instance, there's the concept of Chinese learning as substance, Western learning as function, meaning that Chinese scholarship forms the foundation, while Western science and technology are applied for practical purposes. This substance-function issue is complex and difficult to explain clearly. We are simply illustrating that substance and function is a valid concept. Many scholars have said that if you want to understand something but can't grasp its essence, you must look at its function. When we talk about functions, people can recognize and say, oh, you're talking about this kind of thing. Here, what is affirmed is that the function of Tao is inexhaustible. Let's summarize what has been said so far. Heaven and earth are finite, but Tao is infinite, so we can affirm that Tao does not die. The valley is empty. Why call it a spirit? You cannot predict when it will be full or empty. Therefore, the force that makes a valley is Tao. Using the valley as a metaphor for Tao is quite appropriate. Mr. Yan Fu, who studied Laozi extensively, explained the phrase the valley spirit does not die this way. Tao is empty, so it is called a valley. Tao adapts to endless situations, so it is called a spirit. In chapter 10, Laozi spoke of Tao as empty yet inexhaustible, moving and producing endlessly, comparing it to a bellows between heaven and earth. Since heaven and earth come from Tao, heaven and earth continuously generate all things without exhaustion, so Tao can be said to be immortal. Looking at these 3 points together, we can say that the valley spirit is empty, able to be applied infinitely, continuously existing, and capable of creating all things. These 3 points are concrete expressions of Tao. In other words, we cannot directly grasp what Tao is, we can only describe it by its functions. So, what have we learned from this episode? We see that Laozi's chapter 6 is brief but profound, discussing the core concept of Taoism. The term Tao refers to the origin and destination of all things. Using the valley spirit as a metaphor, the valley is empty, and Tao's emptiness represents its ability to contain all things, allowing all things to pass through it, like rivers flowing through valleys. When the weather changes and there's no rain for a while, the valley returns to its empty state. At the same time, it is the lowest, which is why rivers return to the valley. This emptiness and lowliness allow it to contain everything. So, it can be considered the root of heaven and earth, meaning heaven and earth themselves arise from this. This is what Laozi points out in this chapter, even in a few simple sentences describing Tao's characteristics as elusive, seemingly existing, but with boundless function. Laozi placed particular importance on valleys. For instance, in chapter 39, Laozi will talk about 6 areas, all related to Tao: heaven, earth, gods, valleys, all things, and kings. To be honest, apart from valleys, we can more easily grasp the others because they each have their unique relationship with Tao. Heaven and earth, all things and kings, and even gods are easy to understand. But what about valleys? Therefore, Laozi highlights valleys, showing his particular observations about them. In certain times, valleys are filled with water, while in others, the water flows away, leaving the valley empty. Only then can it be called a valley. These observations inspired Laozi. Even today, we still use the phrase 虚怀若谷, meaning to be modest and open-minded, which comes from a similar context. Students, you can think about this, though nowadays we don't often witness the changes in a valley's conditions. The term 虚怀若谷 is still worth noting. If you want to keep your heart in a modest state, like a valley, on the one hand, being empty, able to accommodate others' thoughts, and on the other, being low, not comparing or competing with others, wouldn't this bring us back to a simpler and more natural state of being? What are your thoughts on this? I would like to hear your opinions.